these long-term relationships or these short ones? I mean, how could you break up with someone over text that you've been with for a year or more? I mean, that's crazy. That's like
No question.
Worse than ghosting.
Yep. All these other techniques that we have around our digital communications are pretty farcical. I mean, we'd rather have emojis than actually write out what we feel. And so we've superficialized a lot of our conversations. I wrote a book, Rich, that I didn't publish as a book, but I wrote it meaning to publish as a book, but I wrote 3,000 words every Thursday. I published every Thursday at 5 p.m. on the Substack, How to Revive the Art of Conversation. And within this is understanding the words you use that come out of your mouth, looking at how the person in front of you is speaking, not just the words coming out of their mouth, but their eyes, their expressions, hearing what's happening in their voice. These are eminently human qualities. And breaking up with a text, this has happened I have a story of a friend whose sister and one son with whom he'd been estranged, or they'd sort of said that they didn't want to have any more communication with them. And I mean, this is a guy who's my age, Rich, and he said, I sent my sister a message to try to get back to her. I was like, what did you do? You sent a text message to get back, after 3 years? No. That's not how you just can't thinking that way. Anyway, I tried to steer him correctly.
So what do you, I know you've written before about the future. Is the current state of things at all what you thought it would be a few years ago? And where do you see things going?
Well, I'm writing a new book, Rich. And so this sort of informs everything I'm doing right now. And it's called The Avatar Trap. And it's about the way our society has been developing. And it's an attempt to try to rectify some of the accepted practices and norms that I think need to be revisited. So within that, I want to rehabilitate some older fashioned values because I'm an old white dude, perhaps. But I also think that we've thrown out the baby with the bathwater in rejecting elements of the past. And so I want us to return to being able to have civil disagreement, have conversations that are rigorous, tough, and yet we can both learn from, as opposed to standing on my hill and shooting down and saying, you're wrong, I'm right, I'm good, you're bad, and come back into some kind of more growth mindset where we can all learn to listen to different people, different voices, and also be more realistic. I think the Avatar Trap also speaks a lot to how we've gotten lost as a society because we no longer wish to entertain reality. We'd far rather the convenience, the likability, the superficiality of an Instagram post than the reality of my situation where we have disease, we have illness, we have death, we have risk, we have loss, we have pain. And this is part of life. And the beauty of life is the ability to go through and the journey that isn't comfortable, isn't delicious and perfect. And rather than shun all these other negatives or imperfections, embrace them and move into reality, because the idea of exterminating death as if it's an illness is about as cockamamie as any society has ever been. I mean, the idea of immortality has been a topic of conversation for millennia. However, just because you can seek it doesn't mean you ought to try to be seeking immortality.
Do you think you understand how things have gotten to this point? Or is it, you feel like, you could speculate here, there, and everywhere, but you don't really know?
Well, I certainly would not wish to portray myself as an all-knowing individual. I do, the first section of my book is how we got here. And the reality is it began a long time ago. And little by little, things happened without necessarily being bad intention, but you move to another place because of what's happened before. And little by little, a little bit more sand, a little bit more issues, it just piles up. And we end up in this new situation that needs to be wound back, at least in some portions. You can't ever go back to normal or back to what we were. But I think if we could have a good conversation about, for example, the idea of freedom or the idea of progress, which are obviously two beautiful words. However, that isn't what it's all about. Being free, well, it comes at a price. I did my film about the Second World War, and the film in the book is about my grandfather who was killed as a officer and a prisoner of the Japanese. And freedom comes at a price. And right now, I don't think that we are paying heed to the price of freedom. It feels like an obvious thing: freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of action, freedom of belief. You can't be willy-nilly about this. And so I think we've got to this position through an awkward series of events that have happened over the last 60 years.